There was a really traumatic corn bin scene in that movie that I feel like was a lot more realistic than this one. I don't
Also,
remember it. I remember
traumatic corn bin scene is not like a real thing. Let's go with that. Let's go with my little clapper.
Keep your clappers to yourself.
Okay, so I picked this movie, and I picked it for a few different reasons. I hadn't seen it. I heard and read really good things about it. Nothing. I haven't read a lot of reviews or anything. It's more just like I've heard it offhandedly mentioned in some movie review podcasts I listen to, in a very positive way, like they. And so it sounded like a good movie. And also, I love John Krasinski and Emily Blunt. So anyway, so those are the reasons I picked this movie. And I did know going into it that it is a horror suspense movie, and didn't think that would be that big of a deal. But honestly, like, this movie kind of sucked to watch. Like, what really struck me about it was that the just overwhelming, omnipresent sense of dread never lets up, like, at all. And I was telling Rach when we were watching it, like, I couldn't even enjoy some of the, like, scene setting moments because the whole premise of the movie just, like, fills me with so much dread. It's like something like the Swiss Family Robinson is super cool. Like, you see this family, like, building their life in their environment. Like, they adapt and they use what's around them, and this is kind of the same. I mean, it's the same principle, but I, like, was on edge the entire time because something about the premise, like, that you can't make noise, is just terrifying. But yeah, that's, I mean, watching this thing was like, I mean, just an ordeal. I was surprised by that, honestly.
I do have to say, this is the first time I've heard this movie compared to Swiss Family Robinson, so that'll stick with me.
Hey, this is where you get your hot takes and your amazing insights. So anyway, what about you guys? Like, what really smacked you in the face when you were watching this movie?
I find your take on it so, like, interesting because I had the exact opposite reaction in that. So I have seen this film before, and then I watched it again, and I have to say, watching it again with the perspective of wanting to, like, capture my reactions to the way things are done and or things are portrayed, it definitely puts a different spin on how you watch the film. I enjoyed it the first time, but I have to say that I appreciated that I didn't feel like an omnipresent, overwhelming sense of dread. It's not like War of the Worlds, where, like, the aliens are out there and they just keep coming at you and you have to, like, keep running to, like, avoid them. And it, like, no, I mean, it's still their environment. I really did enjoy and almost somehow, like, forgot that the reason why they've got sand on all the floors, and the reason, like, I was so engrossed by how clever this new life is that they've developed, where they paint where the wood doesn't creak on the floors. And just, I was so engrossed by all of those details that sometimes it was enough to make me forget that, like, somewhere within, like, the 100-mile radius, or I don't know how far the sound travels.
Anyway.
Apparently, there's 3 of these guys that are gonna come and, like, kill you. And like, while that was still very real, like, I thought they did a really good job in creating, like, an almost a weird sense of normalcy in their new life that I I did not feel that omnipresent, like, as weird as that sounds, like, because the whole reason why they have that entire world is because of this presence. And yet for me, like, I was able to go in and out of remembering that there's a horrifying monster out there.
I wonder if that's like the difference between a first watch and a second watch. Like in a second watch,
Maybe.
you know where
Yeah.
the jump scares are.
The thing that I found most surprising that I did not notice the first watch was, for me, how good John Krasinski and Emily Blunt are at expressing with their faces. Like, and I did not realize that until we can get to it later, but like there are very specific moments where not only is the acting real, I thought that the whole film was like very littered with like choices that were made by either the actor or the director or whatever, where it conveyed a much more emotional feeling in the silence and in the inability to just express, that caught me by surprise.
Before we get too deep into talking about it, Morgan, Rachel, like kind of what were your initial gut reactions when you watched this?
Sue mentioned about how well crafted the movie is, and I think that is the primary thing that stuck out to me. Like, whoever made this film put so much thought and attention and care into making this world. I really like that about it.
Yeah, I agree with all of you guys. I think the Swiss Family Robinson, I could enjoy that, like how they are solving the problems. But I felt stress. But I, like Sue, I could kind of jump back and forth from the stress of a horror movie to like, oh wow, they solved that this way, or wait, this is a flaw, but oh no, it's not a flaw. I don't know, I just was engaged all the way through in an interesting way.
It was so clever in how they revealed how this family's making too. But I mean, I didn't buy all of it, to be honest. Like, I question like the pickle jars of stuff because I've tried canning, and when the jars of glass are in the canning pot, they shake around in there, and that makes a lot of noise. So,
and also, how do you have your farm of corn? Like, how do they plant that corn?
I was wondering how they like harvest.
Kyle's one point of contribution, I will point out here, since we are talking about the corn, was that in this scene of the silo, and I quote, per Kyle, "That's not how grain silos work."
I literally wrote that in my notes. Like, that scene was
Man, y'all are some real farm folk.
Yeah,
I was just
Clayton,
like, okay, sounds dangerous.
Well, we were watching, Clayton's like, well, at John Deere days, they taught us that is actually not how it happens when you fall into a silo. There were a few moments like that where I was like, okay, there's only one entrance into this silo, and how is that creature going to get out once he's in? So as soon as I'm verbalizing this, then they show the image of the blown out side of the silo,
Right.
like the creature busted through. Similarly, another time I was like, okay, there have to be so many animals around this farm, and why are the creatures never nabbing the animals? And then they show the little raccoon getting nabbed by the creature, and I was like, okay, answering all my questions here.
Okay.
Way to go.
Question
Check
answer.
and check.
Yeah.
Way to go, scriptwriters.
A lot of motivation, I guess, I feel is maybe missing from this, which might be a lot to ask for invading aliens, but I mean, if you're gonna write a movie about it, I feel like there should be some motivation.
If we want to get into issues with plot or details that like don't make a whole lot of sense, like, okay, why didn't they just like live in the cave behind the waterfall?
I also asked that question. I love the clever use of sound every time, like it was the daughter's perspective, and then like the sound went away, and then it came back when it changed the perspective and whatever.
I thought the hearing ability was a very a basic theme of the movie, something that we often think of as a shortcoming. If you're a person that can't hear, we think of that as a disability. And then I felt like it was a strong theme throughout this movie that it actually brought so much to the family that they could all communicate with sign language, was a plus for them. And then, of course, that ability for her helps solve the battle with the creatures. So that was, for me, like a basic theme.
I thought what was really well done is also how, in the midst of all of like the terror of the monsters and everything like that, the daughter's like struggle with her dad, like that whole like very real teenage and like family dynamic of and not ever really having the freedom to like sit down with each other and just like hash it out, even if it's like through screaming at each other and going like, it wasn't my fault, or I know you blame me, or like, like the typical tantrum that you kind of work through as a family. Like without having that, they still touched on something that was like very, very heartbreaking to watch. And I thought that they did a really beautiful job of like kind of growing that dynamic and developing that as like a tertiary story almost. Like it's not even, it was, I thought for it being like not a huge thing in the film, it was concise and well communicated and wrapped up nicely. It wasn't just like something tossed in there.
Yeah,
it was well done.
It hit the right notes and worked well with the unfolding of the main story. Like it didn't feel like a distraction or take away from the main story in any way. What did you guys think, like backing out a little bit here, what did you guys think of just the central premise of the movie, the sound premise, like the creatures that hunt by sound? So like making sound is the thing you can't do. Like, I said obviously that it like that really struck deeply in me, like really. But just as like a creative idea for a story, like what was your take on that?
I maintain that it was really well crafted. It's like they had this really cool concept, and then they did explore that concept really well. But for me, when it came, like, that also stops when it gets to the aliens, and then it just does not feel as well executed as the exploration of the concept itself was. And I wish I had seen this in theaters, because as I was watching it with its very silent beginning and everything very purposefully hushed, I could hear the news going in the other room, and I could hear, my dog wandering around the house, and I was like, this is really taking from the ambiance.
You look at your dad and your dog and be like, you'd be dead right now.
I guess I didn't think too much about, or I didn't reflect much on that. I think for me it was clever. Like the whole time I was trying to anticipate or understand how they solve this problem, or it was clever to me, but I didn't really reflect much more on it than that. I think I thought more about like the family dynamics and character arcs, I guess, things like fear and fault, and that's more what I thought about. But who else has thoughts on the sound?
I feel like most horror movies are just like what if this thing happened, or like what if this thing were out there, and then it's just like an exploration of what the hell you would do, or a scenario would be with that. But I did think that the sound element of it was a much more creative way to create fear out of removing a sense, that we rely on so heavily, for many rely on heavily, and than other senses that they could have done. I feel like this concept of like, don't make a sound, or they'll see you they'll hear you, is prevalent in like most horror movies, and they just took that Yeah, I mean, there's always that scene where, like, I'm just thinking like Jurassic Park, you know, they're in the kitchen and they're hiding behind the table and the raptors are coming in. I mean, even movies that are not horror, just action, where the villain is lurking around the corner, you know.
It's a good way to build tension. It always
We've all been there.
So this just like amplifies that.
There was literally a horror movie called Don't Breathe that I now just remembered came out a few years ago, and I did want to see it because that one looked tense. But it was like people break into a house of a blind guy, and then it turns out like he's like gonna kill them all.
Like Blind Man on steroids.
Yeah, and so, seriously. But that was another one where it was literally like, you know, the scenes of them don't breathe, you know, kind of thing. But I still think that even though it's a common use, even I'll call it a trope. I won't save myself that way. I still think that A Quiet Place did do a unique take on it for the fact that it was so prevalent and it was just so focused on in the entire development, you can tell.
There was the one scene where it's the only scene in the movie that has music. Where they dance.
They're dancing,
Yeah, and actually the music was so jarring to me because I was like, surely in a world like this, you would not listen to music. Like, music is so like symbolic of like freedom of sound that, you know, like when that was there, I also thought that was like the most romantic and adorable scene. It was so beautiful, and that was the only scene that also had music in it in the whole movie, I'm pretty sure. That stood out for me a lot. I thought that was just such a perfect input for the film.
I feel like I have two really random things that don't tie into a theme that I want to say.
I'll share my random ones after you.
Okay, well, random number one is I loved that the girl power moment at the end where there's this complex problem that dad can't solve, and then daughter figures it out. I love that. And then my other random thought is I'm so trained in America, meaning like this whole time I was like, get out the gun. When are they going to get out the gun? And then at the end when Emily Blunt's like, I'm like, America!
My random moment in the corn bin, which I don't know why I didn't mention this before. So they actually did really good use of the flashlight in order to direct your the eye line in that. There are so many movies now, like once someone pointed out like bad editing to me, like I've not been able to unsee it. And that was like what I was like, oh my God, it was so clear. It was so easy. Like you can see exactly where you're supposed to look. Because there's a lot of movies too where I'll miss the action because my eye is actually directed somewhere else when this happens over here. But that was just like what was the other random thing? I really liked how succinct the ending was. I liked they killed one. Spoilers. The other two come running, cut to black, movie's done. And they're like, they got this, we don't have to worry about this.
It cuts to the mom and daughter, which I love that you pointed it out, Rachel, but it's like the dynamic shift in power where they go from crafting an entire world of not having any power, just being subjected to whatever might come if they make a mistake, to now going like, bring these on, like, let's defend yourself from this. Right. I mean, because another point from Kyle is that like when the monster was in the basement and it like opened its ear and all of that, right? Kyle was like, there's a soft squishy spot right there, just shoot it, you know? And then I was like, well, you know, the dad wrote that they have armor, so like maybe you can't, like, you know, maybe China tried to like shoot it or whatever, or however the news has, you know, been developing since they arrived, but maybe you can't shoot it. But it's not that though, because once you shoot it, if you don't know how many are in the area, you're committing suicide because that's going to be so loud. Right. But the power shift at the end, like you're talking about, Morgan, where it's just like, now we have a solution. Mother-daughter is like game on. let's do it, and then cut to black, because it makes you feel like they're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
You know, like you're not at all like, or I gotta watch the next one. I honestly did not even think that there needed to be a next one, and I would have been totally fine because like, total awesome conclusion, you know?
Wow, I did not know there was a sequel, and I feel that it is unnecessary.
Also, the kid actors were really good.
They were.
Oh, yeah.
They were good.
Really enjoyed their performances, both of them.
Mm-hmm. I love that little boy. Not the toddler. He was in there for like 2 minutes. Sorry, toddler. I did really like the little brother who's like, "Don't make me go."
Yeah,
Loved
he
him.
has some good. He faces his fears, which is probably a typical story we hear for little boys. But he's like afraid and
yeah, he got to express his emotions.
Yeah,
that never happens in movies for boys.
Then he cradles his little sibling at the end.
Well, should we wrap things up? Anybody have any more observations or stray thoughts?
They were really heavy-handed with foreshadowing, and that irritated me. And I was just like, it was so well crafted in some parts, and then just so like clunk. Yeah, it's like, how many times do they need to show that nail?
No, seriously, that's the only note that I had on the foreshadowing. I was like, that was too much.
I'm kind of with you, Morgan, because I really did appreciate like the story craft and just how tight the story was, just how well made the movie was. But there are also like a lot of problems that jumped out at me.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why I'm like so tolerant of the problems.
You know what? Well, okay, so in my theory is this was Johnny K's first time directing a movie, and they kind of seemed like rookie mistakes, and it's just like, okay, cool. This is still a really good presentation, even if, you know, you still are learning your building blocks.
Like the presentation was really good. It was some underlying
and it wasn't things that were wrong also. It was just like things that could be improved.
Yeah. Well, okay, so for example, like here's my big complaint, my single biggest complaint with the movie.
Yes.
This creature literally rips open the side of a grain silo, which actually most grain silos are made of concrete. Just so we're aware, like thick-walled concrete.
Thank you, Professor.
You cannot rip off the top of a truck cab.
Oh yeah, that is yeah.
So,
what else?
Anything else before we wrap up? Any other final thoughts, complaints, plot holes and flaws aside? Like, would you select this movie to screen at a Sagebrush Hills Film Festival event, Morgan?
No.
Why not?
I was hoping you would just let me go. I'm not sure what event I would screen it at. And then other than the kind of speculative fiction part of it, where it is asking, like, what if this creature came to town? There's not a lot else to talk about.
But I think I would join Morgan, too. I really enjoyed the movie. But I think I would B-list it. So then thinking about if I needed a filler at the film festival, it doesn't feel like it would fit like an X category because it's really not edgy enough. But like if we needed something somewhere, maybe it would fill in. But I kind of feel a B-list for me.
Clayton?
I get what you're saying. And it's like I feel like we obviously can talk about the movie, but I don't see a specific thread that would directly tie to our film festival. So I see what you're saying there. That being said, like I would screen it. Like I feel like it is well made, like it is interesting, and it does feel like it does generate conversation, and I do feel like it is of a quality level that I would show this to people. Like I would put my name on this as like this is something I think you should watch. Sue, what do you think?
This is kind of tough because like I so enjoyed this film, and I'm with you in that it's well crafted. It is it's a well wrapped package. Like I don't, you know, it's not it doesn't feel unfinished. It's definitely professionally made, you know, not professional budget per se, but just like a smart movie. A lot of plot holes, but still like a lot of really good exploration. And I do agree that I think that people would come away talking about it, and even if it's just to like kind of fantasize about like what their lives might be like if they lived in a world like that or whatever. But that being said, I do agree with Morgan and Rachel in that like I don't really know where it would belong in the film festival is my issue with it. I think is that I guess when we're selecting for films for the film festival, you know, it can't just be good and we can't just like it. Like it has to somewhat make sense. It has to have a place. And for me, it's kind of hard to find the place. The natural place for me to put this would be X. But again, I agree with Rachel in that it's not edgy enough to like to justify putting it in X for what it is that we've tried to define that venue to be or that event to be. And so it's a little too mainstream for that. But Glenwood Square, I mean, I would put this as a yes as a filler, and that I still feel like
not enough. It's not enough to have a list of fillers.
Exactly. I hate saying it because I really like it so much.
I do too.
But yeah, this would totally be like we recommend you watch it just because it's so well made and it's a really fun movie. But to invest the time and energy in promoting it at our film festival and putting it underneath the umbrella of like what the event stands for, I don't know that it has a real place there is kind of where I'm getting at. So yes, maybe no.
No screen, yes, recommend. Apparently that's I wouldn't hesitate in recommending this.
Okay. All right. Well, then what are we watching next week? What are we talking?
Yeah. Night.
Good night, y'all.
Nice hanging with y'all. Good night.
Yeah.
Talk to you later.
Bye.